Welcome to another episode of Erik Whiskey Studies, and in this video I'm going to talk about finishing. This video is part of a series that I'm doing on Scotch whiskey production. So we'll be looking at blending, color adjustment, and bottling. Once a spirit has been aged for at least 3 years in Scotland, it may be legally referred to as Scotch whiskey and bottled. So after that 3 years, when a distillery has determined that the spirit in the cask is ready to be bottled, there are a number of choices the distillery has to make, including blending of casks, chill filtration, color adjustment, alcohol strength adjustment, and choices in packaging. So I'm going to be having a wee dram of the Smoky Joe Islay. This is a blended malt, bottled at 46% alcohol by volume, non-chill filtered. I reviewed this a while back when I did a series on Islay whiskeys, and I covered a number of independent bottles. You may see this at Total Wine and More or some other shop. Goes for under 50 bucks. In fact, I think it goes around about $42, $43. A decent dram. Definitely worth the money, considering, minimum your single malts now from Islay, Ardbeg, 65 bucks for it, the 10-year-old. So you see a lot of these different bottles of independent bottles of peated whiskeys, Islay whiskeys. A lot of them are not much to rave about. A lot of them are 40 ABV and all that. This is actually one worth checking out. Blending. With the exception of single cask whiskeys, all Scotch whiskeys are blended. However, in order to avoid confusion with blended Scotch whiskey, it is commonly said that a single malt whiskey is made from a marriage of casks rather than a blend of casks. So this is a blended malt, which means it's a blend of single malts from more than one distillery. So if this was a single malt, they would like to talk about a marriage of casks rather than blending of casks, because that word blended, people start thinking it's a blended malt or a blended Scotch whiskey and so forth. The label single malt Scotch whiskey indicates that it is from a single distillery, not from a single cask or even a single year of production. Even if it has a single age indication on the label, such as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, it may be blended from dozens of different casks from the same distillery. The age statement on the label only indicates the youngest aged whiskey in the blend. While single malt Scotch whiskey may receive more attention from whiskey aficionados, approximately 90% of all Scotch whiskey is a blend of more than one cask from more than one distillery. Blending, or vatting, different casks of whiskey together adds complexity and balance to the finished whiskey, and most importantly, helps ensure consistency from batch to batch and year to year. Blending is an art mastered only with years of experience. Some of the top blended Scotch whiskeys include Johnnie Walker, Ballantine's, Grant's, Chivas, and J&B. So distilleries, they have their age statement whiskeys. Could be a 10, 12, 16, whatever. They aim at not just having an age on the label, but a profile as much as possible to try to have some consistency for that particular age statement that they bottle every year. So unless they're putting a year statement on it, and generally they're trying to aim towards a particular expected profile. They can have casks that perhaps don't meet the profile of any of the whiskeys. Doesn't mean it's bad whiskey, it just has a different character to it. So those casks sometimes will be sold off, or they could go into bottles that are then sold at duty-free or single cask or something like that. But they won't be used in their core range bottles because they're aiming at a particular profile for those bottles. Blenders play a crucial role throughout the whiskey making process, not just at the blending stage. In order to ensure styles of whiskey are produced to fulfill sales projections into future decades, blenders regularly communicate requirements to distillers. The type of cask used for maturation is also determined by the master blender, who is seeking a particular character and consistency for the whiskey that will emerge after aging. The whiskey may be used in a single cask bottling, but it is far more likely to be blended with other casks and styles of whiskey to become part of a blend. Chill filtration. Another common practice at the bottling stage is to chill filter the whiskey to remove flocculants, mainly wax and long-chain fatty acids, which are likely to flock and cause what is known as a chill haze when the whiskey bottle becomes cold during shipping or storage. This filtration will prevent the whiskey from becoming cloudy when it is chilled. This is not an issue with cask strength whiskeys, and on the packaging of such whiskeys, it is common to see the term non-chill filtered. Some brand owners filter at 0 degrees Celsius through an extremely fine mesh, an NA120 filter, while others favor a less harsh filtration at around plus 4 degrees Celsius through a wider mesh filter, an NA45. Heavy filtration can strip out fatty acids from the whiskey, adversely affecting mouthfeel and perceived smoothness. Look out for malts that stipulate that they are non-chill filtered. So this is an example. It says right here, not chill filtered, or another one might say non-chill filtered. Of course, the other big issue we like to harp on is coloring, which we'll get into in a little bit. So I think mostly the cloudiness issue has to do with making cocktails. Cocktails typically going to be on ice. Cocktails, the visual appearance by those who like cocktails, particularly in the, say, Asian markets where they don't want that. That's really important to them. So they're going to chill filter. But as everything in life, there are pros and cons. While you may find it visually more appealing by looking at it, let's get real. If you're really into your whiskey, you care more about the aromas and flavor and the mouthfeel than you do about the visual part. So when you chill filter, particularly harsh chill filtration, you're losing some of the mouthfeel, you're losing some of the texture, you're losing some of the flavor. So for us, we prefer non-chill filtration. Color adjustment. Whiskey color is measured using a tint meter, also known as a spectrometer, usually referencing the Bond Series 52 brown color scale. This is also used for grading honey and similarly colored liquids and syrups. E150A caramel coloring is a color extract color from sugar. In small quantities, it may be used to create a uniform color in the whiskey without adding any noticeable flavor. Now, I have some colleagues who believe they can taste the difference. Of course, unless you're doing a blind and you have side-by-side two whiskeys from the same producer, one with E150 and one without, it's hard to tell. But the line is, it doesn't affect flavor, and they're just trying to get consistency in color. Spirit caramel, E150A, may be added at the blending state to adjust a whiskey's color and help ensure a consistent appearance from batch to batch. Spirit caramel is highly concentrated, and a small drop is sufficient to influence the color of a liter of whiskey. According to Lou Bryson, the sugar used to make the caramel is extracted from barley sugar rather than cane sugar. Called tinting, it is widely claimed that adding caramel does not affect the flavor or aroma of whiskey as it is organoleptically inert. But this is disputed by whiskey purists. Consequently, more single malts are being released at their natural color with labels declaring no added color. One of the big issues is, and I think eventually the industry will catch on, they claim that the consumer will complain if there are inconsistencies in the coloring. I would argue there's more complaints, particularly by whiskey enthusiasts, that we want integrity in our whiskey. We want it to be telling the truth, right? So rather than showing us a fake color, we want a natural color. And if there's some variation from bottle to bottle, we accept it. In fact, we expect it. Whiskey producers that use color insist that they're only seeking to produce a consistent color, not make it unnaturally dark, rather than attempting to deceive consumers into thinking it has more natural color extraction from oak aging. Thus, the addition of Spirit Caramel not only aids color correction, but also helps different whiskeys merge harmoniously when blended. So supposedly, they have a bunch of different casks, the color may be off just a little bit, and so to have a harmony in aromas and flavors in the marrying of casks, they also want a harmony in color, and so using a little bit of E150A, it gives it more harmony. So they're not trying to deceive us, they just want more harmony in the color. I have never heard anyone complain, oh my goodness, this whiskey is slightly lighter or slightly darker than my previous bottle. I've never heard it happen. I've never heard, those sons of bitches, it's slightly darker than the last one I bought. It's never been said. Alcohol strength adjustment. The alcoholic strength of the malt is usually reduced with purified water from around 60% ABV cask strength to a minimum 40 ABV bottling strength. Cask strength whiskey is at an alcohol level without any water being added. However, the older the cask, the less alcohol a cask may contain, thus alcohol levels for cask strength bottlings can vary. But I've also seen, say like the Glenfarclas 105, it's like consistently at 60 ABV. You may say, well, how can they have it consistently 60 ABV if there can be differences from cask to cask? A couple different things. One, I'm going to pour myself a little bit more. One, you can proof down in the cask to the desired bottling strength. In fact, it's probably a better way of doing it. So rather than shipping all your whiskey off to a bottling plant and then they add water there, miles and miles and miles away, you instead proof down in the cask so that when you take the whiskey out of the cask, it's already at the level you want it to go into the cask. So you can proof down to 60%. And if you do it incrementally, it's actually a better way of proofing down because the water becomes more integrated and you're not going to have as many problems with the whiskey, such as saponification, which we'll talk about in a bit. When proofing down to bottling strength, the distiller has to be careful. When a spirit's alcohol by volume is reduced too quickly and haphazardly, it can result in saponification. Saponification is a chemical reaction that can occur in whiskey when fats and oils separate from a water whiskey solution, creating compounds that can give the whiskey a soapy taste. This reaction happens when a distillate with a high concentration of fatty acids is reduced too quickly, causing fatty acids salts to form in the suspension. The result can be an unpleasant taste, a turbid appearance, or a soapy flavor that can't be fixed. So I would actually say saponification seems rarer with the bigger brands who know what they're doing. The few times that I've come across a soapy whiskey, it's a smaller distillery, smaller production, and this is just something that they made an error on because they haven't learned. But generally speaking, I would say with the more reputable brands who know what they're doing and bringing it down to bottling strength, you're not going to see saponification. Bottling. According to Scotch Whisky Association regulations, as it is illegal to mature Scotch whisky outside of Scotland, Regulation 7 also makes it illegal with immediate effect as from 23rd November 2009 to export any type of Scotch whisky in an oak or wooden cask. It is permitted to continue to export Scotch whisky in bulk using inert containers such as appropriate plastic drums or steel containers. However, Regulation 7 makes it illegal, as from the 23rd of November 2012, for single malt Scotch whiskey to be exported from Scotland other than in a bottle labeled for retail sale. Really difficult to tell where this bottle is from. It's got a lot of vanilla. It's got a moderate amount of smoke. It's not as heavy in smoke and peat as Laphroaig, Lagavulin, and Ardbeg. It's a little bit more than Bamor. It's got some nice nuttiness to it. Caramel, a little bit of a fudge chocolate character to it. Pretty much the same front, middle, and finish. It doesn't have a whole lot of transition and has a decent length finish. If I were to put money on it and guess where this came from, I would say probably from Caol Ila. That nutty character does remind me of Caol Ila, and the fact that it doesn't have a whole lot of transition reminds me of Caol Ila, and 90% of Caol Ila goes into blends. Only 10% is bottled as a single malt. So a lot of independent bottlers like to buy from Caol Ila and bottle it as their own. Packaging. The final stage of production is when the malt is given its own distinctive packaging and branding. Ballindellic, Bruichladdich, Glenfiddich, and Springbank currently bottle their own whiskey. However, few distilleries bottle the whiskey on their own premises and instead send the whiskey at cask strength to a bottling line where it is usually reduced with purified mains water. Many brands are quick to talk about the source of the water that they use at the distillery, but few disclose the fact that their bottles contain close to 20% municipal water. One of those little ironies in the Scotch whiskey production you're going to run into when you visit a distillery and do a distillery tour. It comes from this spring, Robbie Dew Spring. It comes from, Josie's Well. Oh, it comes from this mountain, so on and so forth. So there are different waters in production. There is the water that you use for cleaning the distillery that you're not going to put into the actual whiskey. That could be a different source. You have another water that you use for doing your mash. That's probably going to be your local well or mountain source or stream or river or whatever. But the whiskey that you use for bottling and bringing it down to bottle strength more than likely is going to be wherever they're doing their bottling, and maybe just tap water that's been deionized and filtered. So they don't like to talk much about that. Alrighty, that's it for this video. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. And if you've not watched the previous videos on Scotch whiskey production, I want to highly recommend that you do. And until next time, Slàinte. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.